couples of Reddit, what's the most unromantic thing that's happened between the two of you that actually is a stronger indication of love than others might think? My husband helped me on and off the toilet when I was recovering from having our son. At one point I was able to go on my own, but couldn't quite make it back to bed, so he lifted me off the toilet, pulled my adult diaper up, and carried me back to bed. When he tucked me in he told me I make adult diapers look beautiful. It meant more to me than any other time he'd said it, lol. When my husband and I first married, I had a surgery to remove a tumor from my chest. The surgery site ended up infected, and for about 3 months he would have to stuff the site with gauze so we could allow it to heal from the inside out. Was so disgusting, I could not do it myself because it was so painful. He was always so amazing about changing the dressing around it, and I really think it cemented the whole mentality of us vs the world thinking. We just celebrated our 11-year anniversary and are going strong. My husband had a thrombosed hemorrhoid that needed an incision. After the procedure I helped him make sure it was healing properly and shrinking by looking into his ass every day. I needed to make sure there was no infection. If that ain't love, I don't know what is. I had an awful stomach bug. I dry heaved so hard I fainted and fell out of bed. When my husband came upstairs to check out the sound of me hitting the floor, he found me puking into a trash can while I shit myself. He gathered up the sheets I pooped on, helped me to the bathroom to clean up, and put clean sheets on our bed. He then took care of the shit sheets and never mentioned it again. In the first months of dating, during one of our first intimate encounters, my partner stopped to point out a weird hard spot on one of my balls. At the time it was a bit embarrassing, but when I got diagnosed with cancer a few weeks later I was really grateful. We've been together for 8 years now. I got blackout drunk, puked all over my then boyfriend, now husband, restroom, and bedroom. Woke up to fresh clothes. He explained everything that happened after me begging him to tell me. Apparently, I started trying to exorcise demons out of him and just projectile vomited everywhere. He managed to get me drink some water, bathe me, get me to bed, and then deep clean the room and restroom. I was so embarrassed after. The only memory I have of that night is his cat looking at me with concern and judgment. My wife was battling cancer and couldn't poop from all the medication she was given, so I had to give her a suppository. Once it took effect, I had to stay in the bathroom and watch her because she thought she might pass out. True love. We both got viscous food poisoning from Chipotle. We both had diarrhea and we were both vomiting for about 10 hours straight. We had one bathroom. It was a damn nightmare. I won't go too much into details because it was fucking gross, but the fact we still wanted to have sex with each other once we recovered was a really good sign. When I was in labor with our third baby, I had to shit. Like so bad. The nurses were wanting to check me and make sure the baby wasn't crowning. I knew it was legitimately just needing to poop. It wasn't my first rodeo, obviously. The nurse told me I could go poop on the condition that husband had to accompany me in case the baby really did try to make an appearance. My poor husband sat in the hospital bathroom with me while I shit and held my hand through contractions as I pooped. I felt closer to him after that than I ever had before. It was an unbelievably intense 15 minutes and I've never been so vulnerable in front of him. We look back now and laugh about it. Married almost 7 years, my potty time didn't scare him off. I had a severe attack of gastroenteritis. It was coming out of both ends. So I'm lying in bed and I suddenly have to vomit. So I try to run to the bathroom. I fail and proceed to vomit and poop all over the floor. He cleans me, the floor and the bathroom up, tucks me back into bed with some water, gives me a kiss and strokes my greasy and tangled head to lie fall asleep. Most unromantic scenario ever, but he was there to help me get through it despite how gross it was. When I tried to apologize for him having to do all that, he said, "It's fine, sweetie. I love you, and I know if the roles were reversed you'd do the same." And I would too. My wife and I came to understand that we can sleep apart for the sake of comfort and good rest, without it being an expression of emotional distance. I have a now 12-year-old daughter who is not biologically his, however she calls him dad now, and he always refers to her as his daughter. When she was about 10, had been moved in about 6 months. We were settling into things as a family. I was working and they were home hanging out, and she got her first period. I had briefly had a couple small discussions, enough that she knew what was happening but was pretty unsure what to do. So he handed her some toilet paper, told her the basic girl trick of putting it in her underwear, and took her to the store. He helped her pick out some pads, detoured to the ice cream, chocolate, chips, and bakery section, and picked up Junior Advil just in case. They settled in on the sofa. He explained the basics of how to use it, showed her a quick YouTube video, made up a hot water bottle for her, popped her dirty clothes on to soak, and they snuggled, and she talked about it, and they googled answers if he didn't have them. I came home to them having a nap on the sofa, looking like a slumber party exploded, and a happy child. Probably one of the moments I've loved him the most. I was throwing up in front of him for the first time. He was holding my hair back with one hand whilst eating a Big Mac with the other. Zero hesitations. Edit. Has a rugby player. Has very large hands for ease of burger consumption. I was having a panic attack, and he was in the bathroom. He called me in there because he could hear me sobbing uncontrollably. I went in, thinking he was brushing his teeth, and the man pulled me down onto his lap while he was pooping and held me while I was sobbing longingly / hyperventilating / laughing the absurdity. We are now engaged. I donated a kidney to him. Then when his wound would close 4 weeks later, I packed and rested twice a day while trying not to make it obvious that the smell was making me gag. You do what you gotta do. My wife was so sick, like could barely stand sick. She crawled to the toilet and was rolling and groaning from stomach pain. She's never been able to make herself vomit on command. I got her over the toilet, had her take a few deep breaths, and jammed my fingers down her throat, with warning and permission. She demon spewed all over my hand in the toilet. Pretty chunky and sticky, but she felt so much better. When I was first DX with Crohn's disease, my so would have to carry me to the toilet and I would scream and cry from the pain of shitting, while he kneeled in front of me holding me, while I shit cried. She died 10 years ago. I have not dated since. But while we were married she vomited the whole time. She had serious morning sickness that lasted all day for both pregnancies, for 9 months. Then she had cancer and chemo, so more vomiting. She vomited almost every day we were married, but I always held her hair. We just moved in together in 2015. That summer some weird tummy bug was going around, and I got it. We were watching a movie when unexpectedly my stomach just gave one big churn, and before I could get up to run to the bathroom, I puked and shat myself at the same time. My stomach cramps were so unbearable that I could hardly lift my head up, but he carried me in all my mess, helped me to shower, cleaned up my disgusting mess, and nursed me back to health. Every time I needed to go to the bathroom, he'd carry me, rub my back, hold out the bucket, etc. I was mortified, but to him it was normal, and he knows I'd do the same for him. When she took out a maggot that had burrowed under my skin, she has her insect phobia, knew she was a keeper. Our first child was 8 weeks premature because I got preeclampsia and needed an emergency C-section. I was super fucked up from all the drugs, magnesium sulfate, anesthesia, and oxycodone. When I was finally able to get out of bed and shower, he helped my crying, hormonal, leaking body sit in the shower chair and take a much needed shower, helped dry me off, and put on clean pajamas and those rhino-sized pads for all the goo. Back into my wheelchair, where I promptly threw up all the shit that had been pumped into me over the 24 hours after my surgery. He turned me around, wheeled me back in, and started over without even a sigh. P.S. He loves that story and peacocks around whenever I tell it. 4 months into dating my husband, boyfriend at the time obviously, he had to take me to my colonoscopy. I didn't have any family in town and it just made sense for him to take me. Afterwards I laid in his bed while he tried to convince me to pass gas so I wouldn't be in pain. He started farting to try to make me feel better. Lol. A few hours after resting, I had to go to the OB/GYN to get my IUD in. So he had to take care of me all day from being sore in my nether regions. To top it off, it was his birthday. It was the single most selfless thing anyone has ever done for me. My husband's family lived across the country and used to send us boxes of their almost new good quality clothes that they no longer wore. The men clothes were great for hubby and sons, but the female clothes were always a bit too small as I had gained a lot of weight since they had seen me last. My husband always felt so bad for me. Then one time, my hubby lifted up a pair of pants out of the box and said happily, "These will fit you. They're huge." I still remember the look of horror that passed over his face once he'd realized what he'd said. But I loved the fact that he was happy for me getting a new pair of pants. I grew up with my grandparents BC. Both my parents had to work various jobs simultaneously, so my grandfather was my world. I took care of him during his last 5 years when he became bedridden. I tried to visit him as often as I could. He lived with an elderly aunt who fed him, but needed me to bathe him, and, eventually, change his diapers and so on. Early in our relationship, my now wife would come over sometimes. One time I got to his house and found his fridge full and him watching TV, eating a bowl of ice cream. My wife had gone a few hours before me without telling me. 6 months later I proposed. My husband acted as the lone pallbearer for our newborn son's funeral. I carried him for nearly his whole life and my husband carried him to his final rest. The second night we had overnight relations he shot it at 3 AM while we were fast asleep. Nothing like changing the sheets at 3 AM. We're married now. I had MRSA in my wound, had to be packed with silver nitrate and wound tape to assure it didn't close over before healing. That meant my relatively new boyfriend was 2x daily putting me in agonizing pain and first pulling blood and pus soaked packing material out of a hole in my arm. He was then ruthlessly shoving clean materials back in. I knew then he was the one. We've been happily married over 10 years now. I recently had a second heart catheterization to check my heart for blockages. Thankfully there were none. Unfortunately this time they needed to go through my femoral artery and my groin and I needed to remain on bed rest for about 4 hours after the procedure. I had not eaten all day in preparation for the surgery, so when I got out I was famished. The nurse brought me hospital dinner, but I could not sit upright to feed myself. My lovely wife of 10 years, who has been a solid rock for me through this ordeal, was excited at the opportunity to feed me. I'm only 32 years old, so being in this predicament and being unable to feed myself was rather humbling. She happily cut my roast beef and potatoes and fed me a bite at a time. You could just tell that she loved being able to serve me in this way. It was not in any way a burden or a chore or a nuisance. She didn't take advantage of the situation to make a humiliating "here comes the airplane" joke. She just carefully fed me and saw to my needs. I know in her heart she had felt rather useless because all my fear and anxiety was pent up inside. She loved having some way to show that she was there for me in a weak and frankly scary moment of my life. She is much better than I deserve, and I'm so crazy in love with her.